Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 6th March 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. SC says new rules to regulate OTT platforms lack teeth. So currently yesterday we discussed about a court case going on between the head of the Amazon Prime Video India and some litigants or some petitioners about the TV series Thandav. During the deliberations of the court, yesterday the Supreme Court expressed its intent to regulate or at least screen the content that is being hosted on OTT platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime Video and Hotstar and etc. Now today, in the same case, the Supreme Court said that the government's new rule to regulate OTT, that is over the top platforms, lacked teeth to punish violators or to screen offensive content. Yesterday they said there should be a screening process for the content that is being hosted or shown on OTT platforms. Today they are saying that the government OTT guidelines that the government released on February of last month about grievance redressal lack the teeth to punish violators or to screen offensive content. Yesterday, the sitting judge observed that some OTT platforms are showing pornographic content also. So they said that it is not beyond them to order the government to regulate the content. Now they are saying that though the guidelines the government has released on February of last month, these guidelines are mere guidelines. They do not talk about punishing the violators of rules and law or screening the content that is being hosted there. Now, the court said the new rules were more in the nature of guidelines and there was no effective mechanism for screening or to take appropriate action against the violators. Accordingly, the government lawyer has said that they'll consider putting forward a proposal or a draft in front of the court if the court wishes to do so, to which the court has postponed the hearing for later date. So that yesterday I told you that there is going to be some kind of an order from the Supreme Court asking the government to frame new screening rules or at least a law or outright law on screening the content that is being hosted or shown on OTT platforms. Yesterday I told you this. Now see, the court itself yesterday they said that they are considering that the content, they are of the opinion that the content should be screened. Now they are outrightly saying that the guidelines or the law or the draft proposal that the government of India put forward on 25th were mere guidelines and they lack teeth because they are not up to the snuff. Now the court is indirectly expressing its view that whatever the content that is being shown on OTT platforms should be screened. We have to wait what kind of a proposal the government of India is going to submit to the court. If the proposal is what I think it would be, then the court would be happy. If not, the court will go a further step ahead and outrightly give out a judgment stating that the government must constitute a panel or at least a committee to screen the content that is being hosted on OTT platforms. Coming to the next articles, patching the gaps in India's cybersecurity. Through the New York Times article that was published a few days ago, we understood that China has warned India about pushing too hard in the Ladakh area. If they do so, China could turn the lights out of our country. Meaning they are going to attack our power grid. That was the supposed threat given by the Chinese side to India. Now, accordingly, it falls in line with the theory that whatever the outage of power that has happened in Mumbai on October 13th of 2020 could have been a result of the Chinese hacking or Chinese state-sponsored hack. Now, yesterday we discussed about what this group was and how it was discovered and how the government of India reacted. But before to that, there are two sides of the story. One is the union minister came out and announced through a press meet that whatever the power outage that Mumbai experienced on October 13th was due to an human error and not due to any external cyber attack or IT attack. But The Ministry of Maharashtra Home Minister acknowledged that they have constituted a committee to study, and the committee has submitted a report stating that they have found evidence indicating that there was a security breach and the outage was a direct result of that security breach. And he also said that they found 14 Trojan horses in the servers of the state load distribution centers, and there was also an attempt to either upload or download 8 GB of data from the servers. Now we have two statements here. The union government is saying no such hack has happened. The state home ministry is saying yes, there is evidence that the outage that happened in Mumbai was a result of a data breach or a cyber threat. But what is the truth here? Truth lies somewhere in between, because we don't have a clear picture on either side of the story here. We don't know the full details of the full details of what has happened on or what has transpired on the night on the day of 13th October in Mumbai. The state government is saying there is a hack. The central government is saying it is due to a human error. Both sides are not releasing the full details. The Home Minister of the Maharashtra government has said that he is going to table the report in the parliament, but he hasn't done it so far. We have to wait on because we don't have full details with us. We have to assume, we have to be very careful about taking sides here. We don't know the full picture. But coming to the possibility of hacking or a threat of hack from Chinese side, in the past, if you look at in the past, India has been attacked by suspected Chinese state groups multiple times for a long period of time. They have been constantly bombarding us with viruses, malwares, Trojanwares and everything over a period of time. The height of which we saw during the Galwan clashes, and post this changed the entire dynamic. They were earlier they used to do it, and they used to small scale attacks were done in the past, but now they are doing it in a much larger scale and with much more ferocity. Now let us understand the history of these kind of attacks that India has been seeing. The first attack that we can trace back to was in 2009, where a suspected cyber espionage network that was named GhostNet was found to be targeting Tibetan government that is in exile in India, many Indian embassies around the world. They were directly trying to access classified details from these servers that were in Indian embassies. And they were also trying to hack into the mobile phones of certain journalists, mobile phones of and computers of Tibetan leaders who are living in India in exile. This shows that these attacks are very coordinated and the targets are very specific and chosen also. Now the shadow network or the ghost net that was discovered by various cyber security agencies or companies show that a vast cyber espionage operation which extensively target Indian entities including military establishment, news publications and even the National Security Council Secretariat itself. Nobody was out of the bounds of this hacking group or the hacking network. They were trying to access classified details from our National Security Council Secretariat, which is home to India's most premier secret agencies or security agencies. These guys, these hackers, this network, the ghost shadow network or the ghost net, they were trying to access classified details which are detrimental to our national security. So this was not an one-off situation, or this was not a amateur hacker trying to do something. This is a very coordinated and a calculated attack on Indian infrastructure. Particularly, they are trying to get access our military secrets or our secrets that are very important to our national security. And evidence also has been found which shows that they were successful in certain instances where they were able to access classified details also, and some confidential documents were also were downloaded from the servers into IP addresses that were either blacklisted or flagged to be dangerous. And the first that we understand the virus or the network attack that we understood was the Stuxnet, which was used to take down nuclear reactors in Iran. So these hackers, they directly tried to attack the nuclear infrastructure of Iran, and they were successful, and the virus was called Stuxnet. The other was Suckfly, which targeted not just governments but also private entities, including a firm that provided technical support to the National Stock Exchange Board. Now, these attacks are very interesting because at one instance they are trying to access our security establishments. At the other angle, they are trying to attack our economic institutions and stock market directly. So it shows a very calculated attack motive, or they have a very strong motive behind attacking our security establishments and our financial establishments. And the third one was D-Track, which targeted again the financial sector, particularly the banking system, and also they used the same virus or same malware to attack the nuclear reactor, Kundankulam nuclear reactor in Tamil Nadu, and they were successful, and they were able to download this virus into 4 or 5 systems in the reactor room. So that poses a great and grave threat to our national security and our financial security. But when parliamentarians, when civil society and observers raised questions to successive governments, it happened during both the governments. So when the question was raised, answers were given evasively. No government till date agreed that yes, attacks have been happening on our IT infrastructure. This was the scale of attack, this much data was stolen, or this was the a trial of attack and we successfully stopped it before the data was breached. So no government, even sitting MPs were asking in the parliament what was the attack about, what was the data that was lost, did you stop it, have you noticed that there was this attack. So though multiple questions were raised in the parliament during parliament sessions, the questions were vague and the government never answered the parliamentarians' question. But there is much evidence that points to the side of the Chinese state-sponsored hacker groups. Maybe shadow organizations that were working at the behest of the government of China, or they may be some freelance hackers who are trying to sell off the data, because there is a lot of demand to see national secrets of India outside India, particularly in certain cases inside India also, because there are certain countries surrounding us that would pay huge money to access confidential files about our national security. Now there is this also conundrum where when these attacks were discovered in the past, when our government or any other governments asked the Chinese government for help, the Chinese government cracked down on these hackers and arrested those hackers. At one side, they are sponsoring the hacking groups. At the same time, they are also cracking down on the hacker groups. Now, what can you say to a state or a country that is doing the bidding of both sides? As I said earlier, in one side they are attacking using these hacker groups. On the same day, they are going and arresting these people. So you cannot point out directly to China and say that what you are doing is wrong, because they are doing both the acts. They are attacking and they are also punishing the attackers. And when you have intelligence agencies such as Central Intelligence Agency of USA, and you have National Security Agency NSA of USA, these agencies particularly work on intelligence gathering through electronic mediums. And during certain WikiLeaks, you know WikiLeaks, right? So in the WikiLeaks documents, some classified documents showed that the Central Intelligence Agency of America had a program called Umbrage Project. So this project is nothing but the US will hack the systems of the respective country, or let us say US government Central Intelligence Agency hacks the reactor computers in a nuclear plant. But when they come out, during that attack, they leave breadcrumbs like things, like they leave false evidence to implicate some other country. In this case, what happens? America is attacking the computers of India, but they make it look like China is attacking Indian IT infrastructure. So they are leaving. This is a false flag operation. False flag operation is one person is doing one thing, but when you start investigating the attack itself, it will point out to somebody else. So they are covering their tracks and fingerprints also. So now the question comes, if such softwares and technologies do exist in real life, when the victim country, let us say India, who is India going to ask the Chinese that why have you hacked us, or is it going to ask America why did you hack us? Because on the either side there is not enough proof to make such kind of accusations in the world now. So it is up to us to protect our own IT infrastructure. Now coming to the next aspect, what has Indian government done to address these issues? We have multiple cyber security or cyber portfolios in the PMO office itself. There is the National Security Council, which is actually headed by the National Security Advisor of Government of India. He is the premier person, or he is interested with the job to frame India's cyber security policy or policy ecosystem. He has to come up with the entire policy that our doctrine will, our cyber security doctrine will rest upon. Now there is this also the National Information Board, again chaired by the NSA. It is meant to be the apex body for cross-ministry coordination on cyber security policy making. See, not only one ministry has to shore up its defenses, it has to be an all-government approach. So there are these multiple organizations like the National Information Board, the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, that was established under the National Technical Research Organization in 2014, and there is this National Cyber Security Coordinator, who directly advises the Prime Minister on the strategic cyber security issues. So that there are these multiple organizations, persons and advisors in the PMO office itself, and military branches also. There is also this organization for defense cyber policy making. So it's an all government effort, but there is one problem here. The problem is, with the existence of so many organizations, no organization knows what their limit is or what their policies, because there is overlapping between one organization and other organization. No organization has clear cut roles defined. The boundaries between one organization and the other organization are blurred. So when something happens or some policy decision has to be taken, one organization simply slides the file or the policy to the other organization, saying that this is not our domain, this is your domain. That makes things or responses to such attacks or to frame a concrete cyber policy difficult, because everybody is passing out the buck here. So what is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is to consolidate all the organizations, or at least to try to find a balance between the existing organizations, so that they can come out with an actual policy that has some teeth to fight or defend our IT infrastructure and our IT assets. But at the look of the things, there is a little bit of gap between what the government should be doing and what the government is doing right now. So it is very tricky for us when such attacks and the intensity with which these attacks are happening are increasing on a day-to-day basis. There is this question of also the updation of the National Cyber Security Policy. The National Cyber Security Policy was formulated in 2013. It is not yet released. It was formed in 2013, but it is not yet released, and even before it is released, it has to be updated to meet the current demands. This is 2021. Lot has changed since 2013 in terms of cyber security, in terms of access to artificial intelligence, in terms of access to supercomputing. Everything has improved or developed multiple leaps forward. So you cannot fathom that a policy that was framed for 2013 is workable for 2021. So that also has to be addressed here. And we don't have a doctrine yet. See, for the nuclear doctrine is no first use policy. Our nuclear doctrine is as simple as that. Irrespective of how hard the situation is or how dangerous the situation is, India is not going to be the country that uses the nuclear option as its first option. This has earned India a good name in the world, because we are very responsible with our nuclear arsenal. We are very responsible with our nuclear material. So this ensured that there is goodwill and a good standing in the world, around countries around the world, about India's nuclear policy. But when it comes to cyber domain or cyber policy, we don't have any doctrine here. Either we are going to conduct an offensive adopt an offensive cyber doctrine or a defensive cyber doctrine. We don't even know that. Our national security advisor is famous for saying the words, ours is an offensive defensive national security policy. We have a no first use nuclear policy. But when it comes to the domain of cyber security and cyber threats, we don't have a doctrine. We don't know whether it is offensive or we don't know whether it is defensive. Let us assume that the government is keeping everything in the dark, meaning they don't want the world to know which doctrine the Indian government has adopted to protect its IT assets. But given the political disclosure and how policy is framed in India, we can at least assume that there is no such policy as of now, and the government is still yet to figure out what our cyber security or cyber threat policy is going to be. But this leads to the question, when we don't have a concrete cyber security policy, it means that state and non-state actors don't know how India is going to react. So this gives them an opportunity to attack us. If India wants to nip these things in the bud, it has to come out with a very concrete cyber security doctrine. This ensures that both countries and individuals who want to attack Indian IT infrastructure are put to notice, stating that whatever the doctrine that the government of India has about cyber security, it is very dangerous for us to hack them. So let us at least it will ensure that they think before they attack. And it will also ensure that the scale of the attacks is also reduced. When they see that whatever the repercussions of doing a high scale attack on Indian infrastructure is, the cost imposed by India is high, they will also try to bring down the threat level of their attacks. And this will also ensure that whatever the operations that India is going to do are also covered under this doctrine, meaning if you attack us, we are damn well going to hit you back, and whatever you are going to do, the damage that you do, ours is going to do 100 times more than what you have done to us. It's a threat, right? If somebody is trying to hurt you, what you have to at least in order to protect yourself, you have to pose as if you are going to do the damage 100 times worse than what they have done to you. And there is this aspect of espionage, cybercrime, and even the disruption of critical information and infrastructure. They can hit our hospitals, they can hit our electrical grids, they can hit our water distribution centers. So when people are at the core of whatever the attacks or whatever the threat is, the government also must ensure they are well insulated. Now, this also ensures that the government of India or the government cyber security policy sets a precedence for the world to adopt also. So India has to be the flag bearer in ensuring some red lines in the international community. There has to be some international orders, such as India can decide, or India can put forth a proposal stating that critical infrastructure such as hospitals, water distribution centers, electric power grids are off limits for hacking and attacks. So India has to take a proactive role in the global platform to ensure that some guidelines and some red lines are drawn so that nobody crosses that deadlines. And if they do cross those deadlines, the penalties for doing such acts are huge and irreversible. And a clear strategy and a greater transparency is the need of the hour to improve India's cyber security posture. We have to ensure a clean and clear policy, because we have to showcase to the people that whatever the steps that the government of India is taking are far more advanced than what so that the confidence in the people of the population of India is improved. And it also shows our adversaries that India has a very good strategy in place to stop any attacks that it might happen or it might experience in the future. So it gives us two things, and it also showcases that our IT capability or our cyber security capability is at a potent level where our adversary countries cannot compete with. It has to develop to that level. So an all comprehensive, all involved, on all envisaging policy is the need of the hour, and it has to be transparent, so that both at the same time public are happy that yes, we are protected from cyber security attacks, and it will also inform our adversaries that there are some penalties for attacking India also. So that is the article, that was the author's point of view, stating that it has to be a clear strategy and it has to have greater transparency, and it is the need of hour for India to improve its cyber security posture. Coming to the next article, disengagement key for progress in ties. The reason that I introduced this article today here is to understand that whatever that is happening between India and China is still very much active. Here our external minister of affairs is clearly saying that India expects China to work with it to ensure complete disengagement at the earliest. We are reiterating our commitment for a complete disengagement from occupied territories in both Depsang Hot Springs and Arunachal Pradesh also. So we are clearly maintaining our position, and we are clearly maintaining our posture. Both Indian foreign minister and Chinese foreign minister spoke in a phone call on 25th February and reviewed the status of disengagement. Since then, corp level commander talks are going on, but we don't know what has been agreed or what has been said. But in between, as I said earlier, the threat of Chinese cyber attacks has also come into the public domain. So the government is also aware of this aspect to be ironed out with the Chinese counterparts. As far as the Chinese position, China has conveyed a different position on resolution of ties and called on India to put the border dispute in proper position. They are saying that whatever is happening in the border area, let it happen, but let us resume economic ties. To which the Indian government replied, first solve the border issue, then only we'll talk about our economic ties and any other relationships that will happen in the future. So that is what has been going on in the India and China dialogue now. Coming to the next article, more Myanmar nationals take refuge in Mizoram. So yesterday I was saying that since there is a lot of unrest in Myanmar due to the crackdown of military troops on peaceful protesters who are pro-democratic, I told you that one of the side effects is refugees. Yesterday the government said that 20 people or 10 people entered India through Myanmar in various districts of Mizoram and other areas. Now the locals are saying more than 100 have crossed into India from Myanmar to escape the military crackdown there. But officials are saying that we have an official number of 23 people and we are not aware of any other people who have entered into Myanmar illegally. It is a very much still developing area. As far as how this border thing works, Myanmar shares an 404 kilometer border, 404 length of kilometer of border with Myanmar, and it is a very porous border. But as far as the government number is concerned, 23 people have fled from Myanmar into India and have asked for asylum. But locals say that the number is more than 100 people. It is a very much still developing situation between refugees and the situation that is happening in Myanmar. To the next article, technology for air-to-air missile tested. So DRDO was testing this technology called ramjet technology that uses air as a mixture in propulsion to move the missile in supersonic speed. Now as a part of its technology demonstration, they have tested a new type of engine called solid fuel ducted ramjet technology, SFDR technology, in the integrated test range at Chandipur of the Odisha coast. Now DRDO is saying that this successful demonstration of the SFDR technology will provide DRDO with a technological advantage, and it would enable it to develop long range air to air surface missiles which are lacking in the arsenal now. So if with this successful demonstration of SFDR technology, it will enable DRDO to develop long range air to air scramjet engines, so that faster and better air-to-air missiles are developed by DRDO for integration or induction into Indian Armed Forces. And they are also trying to say that whatever the technology, particularly the solid fuel ducted ramjet, is only available with few countries, and India is part of a limited group. So that is a good thing in terms of research and development and adding some sort of new capabilities to our armed forces. Coming to the next article, world is no closer to answers on virus origins. Now we know that a high profile visit was made by scientists from World Health Organization to Wuhan in China. When you know the saga, the Chinese government first agreed for the visit from these scientists, then they denied it after facing a lot of backlash from the world. The Chinese government again said that we are going to grant access to this team of international experts, and finally they visited the Wuhan wet markets and surrounding areas to find the origin of the coronavirus in January. But the WHO mission to Wuhan failed to meet its goals because without any evidence, without any proper investigation, because the Chinese government did not allow this group of international experts to conduct a proper study, without any concrete understanding of the ground situation and without any proper evidence, they came out and said that there is no evidence that Wuhan was the origin of this coronavirus. When this international team said that, it came under a lot of fire, with critics accusing the World Health Organization for relying too much on Chinese fieldwork and data, and even to the extent that WHO has become an fiduciary of Chinese government, because from the beginning of the coronavirus, WHO has been towing the line of the Chinese government by saying that China is doing excellently, China is not the responsible for Wuhan coronavirus. So all this kind of had this impact, and when this team came out and said that China might not be the origin, or there is no proper evidence to the origins of coronavirus, everybody tore apart this committee. This committee is yet to submit its report, but the team members allegedly, out of the purview of the WHO, they said that China was reluctant to share vital data and that could show COVID-19 was circulating months earlier than first recognized. Due to, for whatever reasons, the team was forced to give a clean chit or a green signal for China for origin of coronavirus. Coming to the next article, Quad to hold leadership summit. Now, leaders of Australia, India, Japan and United States are soon to meet virtually for the first time this summer. Accordingly, this will be done under the banner of the quadrilateral security arrangement. Till now, whatever the meetings that were happening, they were happening at ministerial level, not at the head of the state level. But for the first time this coming summer, according to the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, said that leaders of Australia, India, Japan and United States will soon meet under the flag of the quadrilateral security arrangement virtually, and this will ensure that the Quad grouping will go further, and this will enable to change the entire perspective and point of view in the Indo-Pacific region. Remember, they had a telephonic conversation, but they never met due to coronavirus pandemic. If it was not coronavirus pandemic, they would have probably met physically, but virtually nonetheless they are going to meet for the first time. We have to wait and see what the grouping would discuss about and the statements that come out of the group meeting. Coming to the next article, China targets 6% growth and tech supremacy. So the Chinese government on Friday announced that they are targeting a growth rate of 6% in the year 2021, and they have unveiled a 5-year plan and vision for 2035 that aims to expand the global country's footprint globally, and that global footprint would be done through the way of major technological power. They are trying for tech supremacy here. This plan was unveiled at the week-long convention of Communist Party controlled legislature, that is the National People's Congress, and this is the conference where the president, that is Xi Jinping, would lay out his future policies for the public and his country. During this, it clearly shows China is still trying to emulate a superpower ideology, and they want to become a tech or a major superpower in technology, because the next domain is technology based. And this still shows that Mr. Xi Jinping is still obsessed with projecting China as a superpower and more powerful than either Russia or United States. Accordingly, they have also increased the budget of Chinese military to 200 billion for the next few years. So it shows that they are still fighting for supremacy, and he wants to project China as a superpower. Thank you. Have a good day.